Hello and welcome to Backyard Catch. This is Nick Roby. Thanks for joining us once again. It is Friday, September 8th, 2023. We got another week of college football to talk about. Super pumped about this weekend and a lot of fun things to get excited for. And just as we kind of step into the season, that's what's interesting about week one is that you learn a lot about teams. You learn a lot about like where they're at. You learn, maybe who are some teams that are maybe better than you thought, and maybe some teams that you have more questions about. And week one's not the end all be all. And I think it's a classic thing. Do you like hype a team up, or you have one thought going into a season, then after 1 week, your idea can change, but then it's still only 1 week, and there's still 11 more guaranteed games for all these teams. And so there's a lot of college football left. However, for some teams, it's an important game for everybody because it's the next game. But for some teams, it's very important, even more so. So as we get into this, I'm going to give some of my picks on spreads, talk about some games I'm interested in. But before we do that, I did promise that we would talk about Clemson and Duke, obviously, and I didn't forget about that. And that was not what I expected. And I think for a lot of people, most people thought, Clemson would win. Maybe not cover, but Clemson would win. And that Duke being a good team and that they could put up a good fight, but Clemson would come out on top. And even I think people even who were picking Duke, and not just because they don't like Clemson, like I don't know if they would have predicted what happened on Monday night. Yeah, that was very weird. I mean, to see Clemson having outrushed everybody and just could not get out of their own way and score. They were in the red zone 5 times, only scored 1 touchdown. I mean, they had 200 plus yards both in passing and rushing, and that was not garbage time. That was like part of the offense, and they just couldn't do it. And as somebody who watches Clemson football and somebody who was really interested in seeing what this Garrett Riley offense would look like, it's not what I expected. I expected some bumps and bruises, going into the first matchup, but that was, yeah, it just seemed like they were still trying to figure out, there seemed like there were some nerves that were in there and just some feeling out. And then people just, yeah, there weren't enough plays being made. And the offense was getting down there, but then you had the fumble by Phil Maffa. You had an interception. You just the missed field goals, and you give credit to Duke. I mean, they're a strong team, and I don't think like the 9 wins were a fluke. And like Riley Leonard and those guys ready to play. Mike Elko is a great coach, and I've just been impressed with what I've seen in him in a year and now some change. He's a great defensive mind. He clearly had a good game plan and was trying to make Clemson earn it from not getting beat over the top. And especially when Clemson stopped taking shots in the second half, they just basically tried to make Clemson earn it, and Clemson would get close, but they never could finish it. And then Duke was able to, that long run by Leonard escaping 2 tacklers to go ahead in the second half. And then they just slowly started, progressing further. So it was impressive from them. But I think for Clemson, there's a lot to still be improved on. I think there's things to be encouraged about, but I think there's a lot still to be improved on. And so they're playing Charleston Southern this weekend. And if you want more of, insight on, specifically from a Clemson's perspective, I do have another podcast called The Hill and Valley, which covers Clemson specifically. I wouldn't say like just like a beat writer, but just that from more of focusing in on one team. So you have that, but it's a big. I mean, even though they're playing an FCS school, it's a big game because they're wanting to get the offense right and wanting to get things cleaned up because they have that game, FAU, and then you got Florida State coming into town, which that one's a big matchup. But if you lose that one, now you already have 2 losses, and so still a lot to play for them. But it's a big one. Another thing I want to mention briefly is just the whole Tez Walker situation. I know that he had to get held out from the South Carolina game, which is a really big bummer for him because he's from that area, had like 30 friends and family, and yeah, it's just a really sad situation. And if you want to read more about it, you can. But I feel like a lot of us know about it now. And the NCAA ruled that he was ineligible for the rest of the season because he had to sit out for the transfer, transferring for a second time. And then Mac Brown put out a very strong statement. I mean, I've seen someone else say this. It's one of the most strong stated statements that you could write as a coach. He did not hold back a lot of punches and really put out there what I think a lot of coaches and I think a lot of fans are feeling frustrated um, about it being more about the process than versus the person. And just I would just say too, it's inconsistencies. And he didn't get to play his COVID year because his school didn't have football. He then transferred to play football, and then he transferred again, which was allowed at the time without penalty, without losing a year. And then, but then they decided a few days after he made that decision that there was a one you had to sit out a year, and then it was retroactive, but you didn't make your decision. It's like the whole thing is just it's just kind of crazy to me, and I feel bad for the kid, and I'm hoping he gets an opportunity, sometime soon to show what he can do and really just kind of just get to kind of end things on his terms. So there you have it with that. But if you want to read the statement, it's out there on the old Twitter or just wherever, and it's from the official North Carolina account. So let's talk some football. Let's talk some games. So here are some games that I'm in a contest, and so I'm want to talk through those games. And so we'll just jump right on to it. We've got Notre Dame -7.5 at NC State. And so as we get into this, week one, you learn a lot about teams, and I'm still learning too. I didn't have the best week. I think I went 3-7. So not a great week one, but that's what you learn. You watch film, you go back, you get back to basics, you can start over, and then it's a fresh week, so it's a new start. So Notre Dame 7.5 at NC State. This one's interesting to me. It's one of the more interesting matchups because you've got two new quarterbacks who have transferred, two ACC quarterbacks, because Sam Hartman was, obviously at Wake Forest. Notre Dame's looked strong in their first two games, but they haven't played maybe quite. This is probably their toughest competition up until now. NC State's their first home game. They played at UConn. They pulled out a 10-point win, and Brian Armstrong was good with his legs, but I would say like they're wanting to see more improvement on offense. To me, I'm taking the 7.5 with Notre Dame. I think this could end up being a good game, but I just think Notre Dame's ability to run the ball and control the clock, control the pace, and with what I've seen so far from Sam Hartman, I just think I see this being a couple touchdown game by the end, and so I think Notre Dame covers pretty easily. You got Utah -7 at Baylor. Utah with that strong statement win over Florida with their backup, and Baylor is out with their backup. So I'm going to take Utah -7. That one I feel pretty good about. Ole Miss is going on the road at Tulane. Ole Miss is a touchdown favorite over Tulane. Tulane's number 24 in the country. So Tulane has been one of the darling picks of the non-power 5 teams to maybe see can make a run. And this is their first big opportunity. This being at home is a big deal to me because it's not the easiest place to play. Tulane's got a veteran quarterback, got an offense that can be strong too. And Ole Miss, they've got some good pieces, but I think this being at Tulane gives me some hesitation with Ole Miss just like automatically covering. So I'm actually going to take Tulane to cover. I don't know if they win outright, but I'm going to take them to cover the 7. I just think this comes down to less than a 1 possession game, and honestly, probably whoever has the ball last. I mean, that's how a lot of these games work, right? But I'm going to take Tulane at least to cover and maybe even pull off the upset. Texas A&M is going on the road at Miami. They're completing their home and home. They won last year in College Station in like I think it was 17-9 and a low scoring affair. They go on the road. A&M's a 4-point favorite at Miami. This one was one of the harder ones to pick. It was harder because you have 2 new offensive coordinators, and this is like they're really their first big test, and it's hard to know like what you're going to see. And so I think this is going to be a close game. To me, even though I don't know how the whole Bobby Petrino, Jimbo Fisher thing is going to work out. Honestly, I think Jimbo is just he's a play caller at heart, and it'd be interesting to see how much is Bobby Petrino allowed to call the offense. And they're saying all the things that he's getting to. I'm just saying when it comes down to a close game, and you got to get the right play call in, like who's making that call, And with Miami, they've got new offensive coordinator that, which Tyler Van Dyke are we going to get? And are they going to have receivers that step up? And they're at home, but like, what's that? I'm just curious what that environment's going to look like. And so I've got A&M -4. I think they ended up winning by a touchdown. Like last year's number, they would have covered this. And a lot of times too, like the home team, you'll get 3 points for being at home, roughly. That's like a guesstimate number to think about. So, like neutral field, you could almost argue A&M's a 7-point favorite. So, I think A&M will cover this. I think it's gonna be close. I don't feel as like if it was a confidence meter, I don't feel honestly as confident as other ones, but I'm taking A&M. I think to cover on the road, and I think we'll get some of those questions maybe answered later in the year, but I think they take care of business on the road. We've got Iowa and Iowa State. This one's always interesting because they play a big rivalry matchup early in the season because they're out of conference. Iowa's the 4-point favorite. Iowa State. Cade McNamara, I mean, they scored 24 points last week. If they can get that kind of performance, Iowa has a strong defense. Iowa State's having to start different people because of the whole the betting scandal stuff that's going on over there. To me, I think Iowa can control, if they can control the ball and control momentum, they'll take care of business with the defense they have. I think they cover for sure. But I mean, it's not a high scoring game usually with Iowa, but I think they cover. App State is going to North Carolina. North Carolina, as we have this, was an 18-point favorite. North Carolina was very impressive in Charlotte against South Carolina. 18 is an interesting number because what you're saying is like it's more than 2 touchdowns, and it can seem like a lot. However, I just think that North Carolina can score and score really well, and their defense show that they can hold their own. And I think I had some questions answered about their receivers because they're missing, Tez Walker, like we talked about, and Nate McCollum, who they're also, the transfer from Georgia Tech. They're missing those guys, and they looked really strong on offense, and they could run the ball with British Books. And so it doesn't have to all be just Drake May in the running game. So I feel comfortable with that. I'm going to take UNC minus the 18. You've got SMU, the new ACC school, which still feels kind of weird, at Oklahoma, the new SEC school. So we've got a classic ACC SEC matchup. Oklahoma's the 16.5-point favorite. I don't care who you play. Like what Oklahoma did to Arkansas State on Saturday, that was impressive. I think they cover this 16.5. I just think the offense have shown that they're really powerful, and I could see them winning by 3 touchdowns. Southern Miss is going to Florida State. So after their big statement win over LSU and Orlando, Florida State gets Southern Miss at home. It's 30.5, but I just feel comfortable with what that offense was able to do. I think they take care of business, and They seem like they're on a mission this year. So, I mean, it is an opportunity for a letdown when it comes to the spread, but I'm just not, I'm not bet against Florida State in this one. So Florida State covering the 30.5, and then Nebraska at Colorado. Colorado put on a show, as we've talked about on the channel and on the podcast. Nebraska lost a tough one. They lost a tough one on the road at Minnesota. They have to go to Colorado. It's, gonna be a sold out game. National media, Fox's big noon kickoff. I think Colorado was like a 9-point underdog before the game, and now they're a 3.5-point favorite. What they did at TCU, this one to me, I'm taking Colorado all day. I'm not betting against them at home, and I think they do have a follow-up act. I don't think it was a fluke per se, and I also don't think Nebraska's quite the team to really, make me question as much like Colorado winning and covering. I don't. So I think with Colorado, they will be tested, later in the season for sure. But I just think they take care of business at home, and like they're on a mission too. And I don't know. I wouldn't bet against them personally right now. So I'm not. So there you go. You're not beating me twice, Colorado. And then the big one in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Texas is coming to Alabama, and Alabama's a 7-point favorite. Alabama last year escaped with a 1-point win. Quinn Ewers goes out with the injury. You had the roughing the passer play that was called instead of the safety. If Quinn Ewers plays in that whole game, I don't know if Alabama wins. Alabama escaped, and they did. Credit to them, they did. They won the game. New quarterback, and Jalen Milroe looked good. It's Middle Tennessee, and I know that Texas, wasn't quite firing on all cylinders, but at the same time, I think I'm very curious to see the matchup between the Texas wide receivers and the Alabama DBs, and how much Texas is able to move the ball. I think this is gonna be a close game. I can see this being within a touchdown, and which leads me to why I'm taking Texas, because I just think 7 points is just a little too much. If it was like 4 or 3, I'd be much more hesitant. But with 7, I think Texas makes it close, and I think it just comes down to the wire, and which should be a good game. It should be a really fun one from the weekend. So I'm going to take Texas to cover the 7. So just running that back, I have Notre Dame 7.5 at NC State. Utah, I'm taking them 7 on the road at Baylor. Tulane, I'm taking the +7 at home against Ole Miss. Texas A&M -4 at Miami. Iowa -4 at Iowa State. UNC -8. I'm taking them to cover the 18 at home over App State. Oklahoma at home, the 16.5 against SMU. Texas, the +7 at Alabama. Florida State, the 30.5 at home against Southern Miss. And Colorado, the 3.5 against Nebraska. So there you have it. A bunch of fun college football. I'm super pumped. It's gonna be a lot of fun matchups this weekend, and be very interesting to see when the dust all settles after this weekend, what the cards look like, and who's ranked, and all the fun storylines as we start heading into getting closer and closer, to October, and getting a little bit more settled in the season. But a lot of fun football. Hope you enjoy it. Have fun. Enjoy hopefully some beautiful weather where you are. Helpful things for me, if you're wanting to know how to support the channel, you can we're trying to put out more content on the channel, so subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we're putting it out there. Like the video, that's really helpful for us. And if you are on podcast, make sure you subscribe so you can get all those latest episodes and latest updates. So thank you so much. Hope you enjoy a wonderful weekend of college football. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.